Hi guys, welcome to today's episode of Coffee Catch Ups with Endurance Athlete, which I now realise, by the way, is quite a mouthful. So today's episode is with Mika Thewes. I am very glad she double checked that I knew how to pronounce her name before this episode because I was going to get it wrong. Mika is a pro trail runner, very ultra runner for the company Janji. She focuses mostly on 200 plus mile races, and I found it quite amusing that she prefers to kind of 100-mile distances as the shorter races. I think that's amazing. I only kind of recently learned of Mika through my social media. But as I've listened to other podcasts with her and learned a bit more about her, I was just really curious. So I was really glad she agreed to chat to me. I think it was a really good episode. She's just very down to earth, very practical, but has a very interesting background as well. So hope you enjoy as much as I did. Hi, Mika. It's nice to meet you. But if you could just tell us a bit about who you are, what you're about, and some of your most notable performances, I guess.
Okay. So I'm a trail ultra runner. I run for the company Janji, and um, I mostly do longer events. So 200-mile plus is my specialty, I guess. And yeah, I've done 14 200-mile plus races, and I've had a couple wins at them. I've won, and I have a few course records as well. So I have the course record at Bigfoot 200 and Divide 200, though it was a first year race, so that's kind of by default. And
Nice.
I had some fast performances as well at Tahoe, and two third place finishes at Cocodona now. So
Nice. And is Cocodona, is that the one that you've done like 5 times? Is that right?
no,
Oh,
no,
it's
that's Bigfoot. Yeah. So
Bigfoot.
Coco,
That's Bigfoot. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry, that's Bigfoot. Okay, cool. So
five
that's like, does that count as 5 out of the 14? Or are you
Yeah.
not counting those?
No, I count the ones I've done multiple times. There's not so many 200s that like it's hard to get at least the non-looped courses. I'm not a big fan of loops personally. I
Yeah.
more prefer the mountain races, point to point, or like more like big loops. And so yeah, I've run. I mean, it's such a new sport that there's a lot new ones popping up, but there weren't so many that you could really get a ton of finishes without having repeated some of the races.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And is it, you've got Tahoe coming up again very soon? Is that right? Is that in June?
Yeah, it's less than 2 weeks away, so
Nice. And how are you feeling like going into this one?
I'm pretty good. The recovery from Cocodona was in early May, so it's been a little slow going for me, but right now I'm starting to feel good again, so pretty
Yeah.
hopeful. Fingers crossed for Tahoe. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Actually, can we talk about Cocodona from this year? Is that the one? Did you come in third? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you before the race you fell and you got a
Fractured.
fracture. It's fracture. Yeah, you got a fracture in your elbow, and then you raced anyway, obviously, and then you did you have another fall during the race and take some time out?
Yeah, so the race didn't exactly go the way I had wanted it to this year. Um, I had been going for a sub 70 finish, which I was on track for until after I left the last aid station. Yeah, I had two really bad falls. The first one, I hit my elbow, which, the doctor told me I could race, I just couldn't fall on it again. And so definitely threw me off that fall. And then like 2 minutes later, I fell again and I hit my chin on the ground. like
Yeah.
directly because my arms were on the side. So all the force went through my chin and I didn't break it, but like my teeth punctured the inside of my mouth. And so I was like bleeding out of my mouth and like my chin was so sore and got really swollen and I like couldn't chew really anymore. I couldn't really move my jaw very much. Yeah, so I had been bleeding. I was doing pretty well, and then I left the course for like 12 hours. And then after sleeping for like 10 hours, I woke up and the race director let me get back on course to finish, but it was not quite the race I'd been hoping for.
But okay, you left the race for 12 hours. I'm so confused. You still came third. That's insane.
I was
What?
pretty far ahead when I fell, so
That's that's so far ahead. Oh my God, that's actually more of an amazing result than if you had just been able to like march straight through. That's amazing how far ahead you were. Yeah, not the best experience though. Sorry. That sucks.
I You know, I Cocodona, it's not my favorite race just because I'm not much of a desert runner. And so I always have a hard time with something at that race, like something always goes wrong. Tahoe and Bigfoot are more mountain races, and those are more my terrain that I prefer. And so I always struggle at Cocodona with the desert and everything. It's just not my favorite. And so yeah, it does seem like something always goes wrong at that race.
I would say that was a pretty bad one though. Yeah, it's definitely impressive that you carried on in the first place. Is the elbow okay now?
Yeah, it's I got more x-rays and it's healing up pretty good. So I like it wasn't a bad fracture, so it wasn't too rough, but the main
Yeah.
issue is that I couldn't twist my arm very much, and so like I couldn't open bottles and stuff. And so that was
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
the biggest, and I couldn't use poles at all. And
Okay.
so those were the two limiting factors I would say with the elbow. But otherwise it wasn't super painful or it was relatively functional. So
Yeah. Okay. That's good. So you've got Tahoe coming up, and then are you gonna be at Bigfoot this year or not this year?
so I run it on odd years, but
Oh yeah. Okay.
it's yeah, it's become my thing. And but I'm always at the race. I usually volunteer. So I'll be volunteering and pacing this year, a
Oh,
friend of mine.
nice.
So and then
Nice.
actually I'm going over to Europe to race in the fall.
Oh, cool. Which one are you doing?
Tour de Géant,
Oh yeah, in oh wow.
Italy.
Okay, mountain race. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of climbing in that one.
Yeah. So that's in
So,
like September-ish. Yeah,
yep.
okay. Wow, nice. And mountain races, why do you think, I guess why is that your cup of tea? Do you think why is it mountain specifically?
Well, I live in Colorado, and I really like the trails out here. And just the mountains, like mountains, but also like forests. But I like climbing and descending.
Yeah.
I don't like the flat races as much. So kind of the varied terrain, and I mean, it's just so beautiful when you get up into the mountains that, you know, it takes it like this, right? Like to some extent, it's just so enjoyable. It distracts you from the fact that you have to run for like 3 days.
Yeah, that'll do it. That's that's quite a long time.
And a lot of times the trails, like desert trails to me, it's just a lot of sand and rock. And like I feel like it just chews me
Yeah.
up. And then it's like everything's like spiky, right? So you're getting caught on like cacti. And the mountains, like I don't know. I mean, it's not like they can't be technical, but um some of the trails are just a lot smoother. And yeah, I just like
Yeah.
climbing and descending a lot more than kind of running on the flatter
Yeah.
terrain.
That's fair enough. Like, I feel like mountains are probably a more hospitable environment than running across a desert. I would say that's pretty justified. Everything in the yeah, you're right, it's all spiky. But I mean, living yeah, I don't I'm my map of the US in my head is abysmal. I'm so sorry. But I have heard a
Okay.
lot about Colorado. It looks like a dream place to live and train. You're not from there initially though, are you?
No, I'm from kind of the middle of the country, Midwest is what we
Okay.
call it, where there are no mountains. There's a lot of trees, but it's not super interesting in terms of like trail running. Whereas Colorado, is right um, where all the big mountains are in the country. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more varied terrain, and you can get like, and we do have some drier areas, so you do get can get some more of the deserty kind of vibes if you want it. But just the access to the big mountains is just really amazing out here.
Yeah. Yeah. And when did you move there?
2018, I've been living here.
2018. Okay, cool. So what were you doing? I guess, are you running full time at the moment? Is that your career? Because I read that you were trained as a ceramicist too, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, so I am mostly focusing on running right now. My background in terms of education and stuff is art, fine art. I was doing a lot of ceramics. I've my undergraduate and master's degree are both in ceramics, so
Okay.
um, I've had a lot of schooling in that. And I still enjoy art, but I've kind of focused more on running the last couple of years, I guess,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But
No, that's yeah. That's really cool. I mean, I don't know quite how to phrase it. From listening to other podcasts with you, you're um really super practical and like logical from the sounds of it, and it contributes to your talent, I would say, because that's part of like not that I know what I'm talking about, just full disclaimer there, but like 200 plus miles, so much can go wrong. And like you said in one of the other podcasts, it's about, okay, that happened. How are we going to deal with that? Like just management skills, right? So you've got a super practical side of your brain that I really admire because I'm a bit of a faffer. Like I'm not, I don't always have that side of my brain. So I love that about you. But then you've got the like creative art side that's obviously been a big passion for you as well. And I would say they're pretty different. Like that's quite a unique, in a way, mix of things to have. So yeah, I guess like where did that come? Like where did running come from? Because I don't know. I think you said you did your first 200 mile at 24, so that must have been either during or post school. So the art came first. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, actually, my dad's an artist, so I've always grown up
Uh,
around art. And I actually think, there's a lot of crossover actually between the two. Like, you do need to be practical, but you have to be super adaptable at the longer races and like, yeah, be able to, come up with creative solutions when you have an issue. And just in terms of like, I'd say the biggest crossover is like when you do go to art school, it's a lot of work and you're doing a lot of late nights, all nighters. Like I used to pull shifts in the studio where I was working for like 24 hours, 36 hours straight without leaving. And so it like, I've always had a good ability to focus, like
yeah,
pretty much single-mindedly on a thing. And it did help me in my art, especially like ceramics, where time is a sensitive issue because things dry, and so you have to like
yeah,
work on them at a certain speed. And so sometimes you do need to work on something for like 20 hours straight. But
yeah,
and then with the running, obviously with the 200s, right? You're running for, you know, 24 if you're doing 100 or, 60, 70 hours. And so there is also a certain extent of like just single-minded focus you need for that as well.
yeah, yeah. I get, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense actually. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. I guess there's like an internal drive factor that you just have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that's cool. You got art from your dad and running from your mum.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
really
much.
cool. That's really nice. I guess,
It
yeah,
was,
from there, I guess when and how did you get into running, like till now?
yeah, so my mom used to make us do like small local races growing up, which I always hated, obviously. But I used to like rollerblade with her as she was like training for her marathons. And so I did have a certain amount of exposure to it. And then actually I went away to school for college and I was just really out of shape. And so after my first year, I came home and was just wanting to get into shape. And I just picked up running again. I
Mm,
had never seriously done it before. So I was like 18, 19 years old.
yeah.
And I picked it up. And within like 11 months, I signed up and ran my first marathon. And I
Wow.
did a couple of them while I was in school. And then when I was, I must have been 21 when I did my first 50-mile trail race. And that was the
Oh,
first trail race I ever did.
yeah.
And I hadn't really run much trail before I actually did the race. So that was a pretty steep introduction to trail running. And then once I graduated, that summer, I did my first 100-miler. And then, so that would have been 2013. And then in
Yeah.
2015, I did my first 200. And shortly after, I started grad school. So I kind of was running a little less during those 2 years. But
Yeah.
once I graduated from grad school, I kind of picked it up again and started doing more 200s.
Wow. Yeah. And I guess did you just kind of were you part of any kind of groups at school or was it all self-inflicted
We
running?
had yeah, we had a very small, as you can imagine at art school, a very small running group of a couple people that would show up and run. And I had actually, I don't even remember his name anymore, but there was one of the grad students when I had just gotten into running before I did my first race, which was a half marathon. And he did some long runs with me, which was really nice. And I was like,
Nice.
do you think I could do a half marathon? And he's like, oh, yeah, definitely. So he was very encouraging, which was nice. But yeah, the running group slowly died over my 4 years at school for sure. But I ran a lot with my mom when I was home, and I
Yeah.
did some races with her. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of solo stuff. Um, I would say mostly.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean because you're obviously talented at it, but it doesn't all come from that. I guess how did you I feel like there's did you kind of just figure it out as you went what training was working for you, or were you like researching running stuff all the time? Did you get obsessed with that side, or were you just going out and winging it?
Yeah, I'd say I've been self-trained for most of my career. I actually have a coach right now, and I also used him back in 2022. He's really great. His name's Luke Nelson, with Evoke Endurance. But I mean, for a decade, I was just totally pretty much self-trained. And I didn't, you know, I didn't know a lot. I pretty much muddled my way through and figured it out. But
Mm,
for until my 30s, I really just went out and I've always been a relatively high mileage runner, and I would just go
mm,
out and do runs at an easy pace. And actually, I think that's been very helpful now because I have gotten a lot faster in the last few years because I basically did like, almost a decade of just base building at an easy
yeah.
pace without like, I didn't do a lot of speed workouts. I didn't do any serious hill workouts. I was just going out to run. And when you do have that massive endurance base, once you do start doing some of the more technical things like heart rate training and more specific speed and hill workouts, like it really does increase your speed a lot, but you do need that base before you start to like focus in on the specifics. So
Yeah.
inadvertently, I was training myself extremely well, but I didn't
Yeah.
really know I was doing that. But yeah, for sure, it's very helpful to have kind of that background of just like kind of easy high miles where you can just kind of grind for a couple days, you know, and you're
Yeah.
not necessarily fast, but you have just that endurance base.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it's I would guess that it's probably helped you with like kind of the injury factor now because you've got such a huge, unless you fall and break your break your arm. Unless you do that. But it must be good to have like a really solid base when you're adding in that speed work and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I do have a few kind of nagging issues. Like I've always had some issues with my ankles and stuff. But yeah, it definitely helps with injury prevention. And it was interesting. I forget where I read this, but just talking about, as women, just some of the issues we deal with like bone density. Um,
Yeah.
I read somewhere that, it's like basically high impact, doing a lot of high impact activities in your 20s is one of the best ways to build bone density. And I didn't necessarily do that because I was thinking about it, but after having read that, I was like, oh, I did spend pretty much all of my 20s just building, like doing high impact, like workouts all, and
Yeah.
so I read, I don't know if this is true. I probably shouldn't say things that I don't know the research on, but I did read that for women, that's actually a pretty beneficial thing to do in your 20s.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that actually makes a lot of sense because they say I don't mind not being factual. I'm not factual either. It's like very loose. Oh, I think I read this, but I think weightlifting is meant to be like quite heavy weightlifting is meant to be beneficial for your bone health when you're a bit older as well. Although I guess it makes sense that it would be good to have a background in it from when you were younger as well. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense when we're still able to heal everything in our 20s, touch wood, that it would like, yeah, strengthen over time. Yeah. I am a bit worried about that from like, I mean, we touched on it privately earlier, but from the bone health perspective for me, because of my, let's call it hormonal issues, that it might not be great when I'm older. But hey, maybe the running balances it out. You never know. Yeah.
Yeah, and
um,
I have heard a lot about, yeah, weight training as you age definitely is supposed to help a lot with the bone density.
yeah. Do you do any like gym stuff?
Yeah, so during my training cycles, like earlier, like right now, I'm kind of in racing, the racing stage. So I'm not doing really much workouts, but for sure during my training cycles, I do two strength workouts a week, pretty much, um, depending on what I'm focusing on training for. But
Yeah.
yeah, this year I was doing I started lifting some heavier weights and doing some different workouts because I was actually marathon training in the winter. And then I do a lot of core. I do a core workout every week, usually as well.
Nice. I did see that on your Instagram. Was it that you did Boston? Was it this? No, last year. Yeah, last
This
year.
year,
Oh, this year.
yeah.
How did that go? That is very different to what you've been doing.
Yeah, so back in 20, gosh, what year was it? I happened to qualify. I actually jumped in. My mom was doing a half marathon, and so I just last minute signed up for a marathon. And I managed to qualify kind of on pretty much no
Oh my
training.
God.
And I guess that was the end of 2022. And then just talking to people, everyone's like, well, you got to do Boston once. And I was like, well, I don't want to have to run another marathon. And I qualified. So I guess I just have to sign up. And so I've been telling everyone I'm officially retired from marathons now. And I really feel no need to do another one, but I did do it. It was quite the event. It was
Yeah,
a lot. I mean, everyone loves that, and everyone comes out to cheer, and it's a lot of energy there. Um,
yeah.
And it's just crazy. Like the whole city of Boston transforms into like, it's just all runners everywhere. So it's really
Yeah,
interesting. But I'm not a road marathoner. I don't find it super fun or interesting.
yeah.
So it was fine. But yeah, I don't see myself going back to that at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. It's quite amusing because to road runners, like that's such a big deal that you did that and you're just like, it was fine. That's totally fair. It's not your thing. I think I'm the same. I feel like I mean roads just kind of monotonous, right? That's a big event, so it's different and it's cool with all the people around and the atmosphere. But yeah, just smacking tarmac over and over again isn't really for me either. I wouldn't say people like super into their like paces because obviously the idea is to be speedy, I guess. But yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool that you did it though. Official retirement done.
Yes, I'm happy to be done with it. So
Yeah. So is your mum still running a lot then?
yes, she did. I paced her at her first 100 miler a few years ago, and she's actually training for another 100 miler. So
Oh my God, that's that's really, really impressive. Like really, really impressive. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
and
nice
we'll
that she got you into it.
yeah, we'll see if I can convince her to do a 200 too. So
Oh,
I'm working on it.
does she come? I guess she probably comes and watches some of yours, so she knows what it's about.
Yeah, so she got me into running obviously, but I started trail running as after my first 50 miler, and
Yeah.
I kind of got her more into that side of it because she had been mostly a road runner. And she had always
Okay.
wanted to do a 50 miler, but she just didn't really go to the trails often. But
Yeah.
she started after I started going, and started doing ultras. Yeah, she was there at all my first races when I was like in my early 20s. She was pacing and crewing. And she hadn't been to a 200. She came out to Tahoe briefly in 2022. And then actually the first race she actually like came to and like helped at for 200 was Bigfoot last year, so 2023 she was there. And she
Yeah.
actually paced me in the last section, which was really fun. But
Nice.
that race is so hard to crew, so it was kind of mean to me to make her go to that one. But I think she enjoyed it, and she loves like she likes races, and she's
Yeah.
super friendly, so she like makes friends with everyone really easily. But she's definitely got more interested in it after coming out, I think, and realized that it's not as hard as she thought it was, right? Like, because you see some of the people that are slower and obviously they go through a lot having run so much longer, right? Because
Yeah.
they're running like 100 hours, which is a long time to be out there. But they're getting a lot more sleep, and you don't necessarily have to be like an elite athlete to accomplish it. It's like to finish a
Yeah.
200 is very attainable actually for I think most people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes it sounds so much harder. Being being slower though. That is so long to be on your feet and to be thinking about have I drunk enough? Have I eaten enough? Like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and like
But
the weather swings that especially you can experience being out there for so many more days. Like there are races I've been at where it's like hot for most of the race, and then like on the fourth day it like suddenly it rains and you're freezing, and so like people are hypothermic after running in like 90-degree heat on the first day, or
oh
like it's just like it starts snowing on like the fourth day, and like things like with that longer time period they like experience a lot more, and yeah, there are a lot more challenges you can deal with, whereas if you finish in 2.5 days, like sometimes
yeah.
you don't have to deal with all of that. So
Yeah, and that's enough of it. Like that's a lot to deal with already. So yeah, carrying all the kit with them must be extremely painful. Um I think it may be an immature question, but I'm genuinely just interested because I haven't done a race of that distance. Where are people going to the toilet? Like, what's the situation there? Is it you wait till you get to an aid station and there's somewhere, or are you just out in the woods?
Yeah. So usually, yeah, if you can wait to the aid stations, it's the easiest thing to do because there are usually bathrooms or some kind of like, in at some of the more remote aid stations, there's like lugaloos, which are, not not anything fancy, basically like a bucket with like a trash bag in it, right?
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, people do go in the woods. I mean, it's
Mm.
in the US, we have like certain, not necessarily rules, but it's like they're kind of rules, but
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
like things to be observed is like, you know, obviously you can pee in the woods, fine. But if you have to go to the bathroom in the woods, you're supposed to dig a hole that's like at least six
yeah,
inches deep and bury it. But then you
yeah.
have to carry out any of like toilet paper or anything you use and throw that
Right.
away at the aid station. So that's kind of the rules for the
Yeah,
US
okay. Yeah.
trails.
That makes sense. It was just because when you said, I mean, obviously that applies over 2.5 days too. But when people are out there for 4 or 5 days, I was thinking like, well, how are they like how are they managing all the normal stuff as well, you know? Um but yeah, no, that rule applies here as well, like in general. I mean, we yeah, try and avoid it anyway, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Um I guess onto nutrition stuff, if that's okay, because yeah, I think your Instagram handle, I like it, it's like Sugar Crash Vegan. So where did that come from, and where did the veganism come from, I guess?
Yeah, so I do, that is my Instagram handle, because I thought it was funny. Because I eat a lot of sugar and I fall a lot, and I do eat plant-based. And I actually recently was talking to someone about this. I guess the best way to describe myself would actually be plant-based as opposed to vegan, just
Okay.
because I've been vegetarian since I was a kid. Not super strict. I think about 13 is when I stopped eating most meat. And I went vegan back in 2016, I think. Um, but the main reason that pushed me to change was like a sustainability kind of reason. And
Yeah,
so I mean, I don't eat any animal products, but I do, we have bees at our house. My roommate keeps bees. And so like I'm not against honey. Like I do
yeah,
eat some honey. And then like in terms of like buying products, like, you know, if you take care of your stuff, right, things like leather and down can last you a lot longer. So as long as like
yeah,
I'm buying down that's certified, as cruelty free, right? When they don't do the live
yeah,
plucking and stuff, like I'm kind of more okay with that. And I do own leather because it's like, you buy one good pair of leather shoes and it'll last you a decade
yeah,
if you take care of
yeah,
it. But if you're buying fake leather and you have to buy a new pair of shoes every couple of years, that's just going in the
yeah.
landfill. So yeah, I do like that title. Maybe I shouldn't use as much just because I guess I'm not a strict vegan.
No,
But
yeah.
it's a lot to think about. And yeah, I don't eat any animal products, so that part is definitely very accurate.
Yeah, yeah. No, I that's vegan to me. I know people have like yeah, strongly varying opinions on it. But what you do is actually I don't know, I feel like that's better. I know you hit it from a more of a sustainability angle as well, but that makes a lot of sense. Like if it lasts longer overall, that is probably going to be better for the environment. So I think more of a like I have friends who are they would call themselves vegan maybe or plant-based as I think most people tend to say now. But if they see in the reduced section of shops, like either fish or meat about to be thrown out, they'll buy it and eat it. And I think that's a way better attitude because then it's not going to waste. Like that would be a lot worse. Yeah, and it gets a bit complicated because then you're like, oh well, the shops still think you're buying it, so they make more of it then. But I don't know. I would feel a lot worse if it was just being thrown out. So I think a bit of flexibility in that is good.
And
Like
there's
you
a lot
have.
of flexibility in the plant-based title, I'd say, for more room for that kind of thing. And whether you're, yeah, strictly no animal products in your diet or not. But, and there is just a lot to think about, right? Because like, I don't know, I heard somewhere that like Nutella announced that they're making like a vegan Nutella, but like everyone knows that Nutella uses palm oil, and most people try to avoid palm oil, and it's like,
Yeah,
well, if you're care like really focused on kind of environmental issues, you're still not going to buy
yeah,
the Nutella because you're like, well, I don't eat palm oil. And so
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's so many things to think about. And
Mm,
a lot of the vegan, junk food products, it's not like I don't eat any of them, but like a
yeah,
lot of them are just like all these weird, yeah, like oils and stuff. And so like
yeah,
focusing on like a plant-based diet where you are eating, a lot more like vegetables and whole foods, and like
yeah,
paying attention to like what's actually in your food, I think is like good for anyone, no
yeah,
matter what your diet is.
yeah. No, I think that's a really healthy attitude. Yeah, and diet from the sounds of it. I mean, yeah, what kind of stuff are you eating? You must have to eat a hell of a lot to fuel. I think you do kind of roughly like 80 miles a week. That's a lot of fuel that you need. So what
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean,
stuff?
and during training, this year actually I was running like 100+ mile weeks pretty much every week. But I try to eat healthy dinners. Usually I do like some rice noodles and vegetables, and then a protein tofu or tempeh usually. Uh, and try to stay away from all the weird soy stuff that's like weird chemicals. But yeah, tofu tempeh, and then I eat a lot of carbs, honestly, I eat a lot of sugar to
Nice.
fuel. I drink sugary coffees, and like it's not like I have a clean diet. I would never say like I'm like a
Yeah.
clean eater in any way. Um, like peanut butter and jelly, bananas, like
Yeah.
definitely room for some junk food. I mean, the protein bars and stuff you always have to supplement with, it seems like, just to,
Mm.
yeah, to get enough calories when you're training really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And then yeah. I think you don't need a if it works for you, it works for you. I don't think there's really any such thing as a super clean diet. It's probably more damaging in the long run anyway. But like when you're kind of going I mean yeah, at all of your races 200 sort of plus miles these days, bar Boston.
Yeah, pretty much that's what I focus on. I'll do some smaller races every once in a while, or not smaller, shorter distance races every once in a while.
Yeah.
I'm not really big into the whole like training race concept that
Mm.
some people like, you know, um, just because when I'm at a race, I can't really not race. So
Mm.
every race I'm at, like I'm pushing. And so if I don't have room, if when you're training for a race, you don't want to tire yourself out. So like I don't do
Yeah.
hundreds to prepare for 200s, because I would
Yeah.
just go all out at 100 and end up needing a lot of time to recover from that. And so
Yeah.
I will do some short, like I did like a 50K, or like maybe around a 50 miler sometimes, just with friends and stuff. But
Yeah.
I do focus on the 200+ mile distance
Yeah.
pretty much exclusively, just because I find them so, and like they're just so interesting, and like they're a lot more interesting to me than like the shorter distances now, just because there is so much more to think about and deal with, and they are so different. And there's really, I just haven't never found anything quite like the 200+ mile distance.
Yeah, lots of management skills required and creativity, like you said. Yeah, for that. Um, but I guess I was gonna go how I mean, because you mentioned on another podcast, sometimes it can be hard when you come into an aid station that you can't find plant-based stuff all the time. And I would struggle, I personally because of allergies. Like I can't eat most other things that other people would have. So kind of how do you manage that? Are you carrying all of it with you and you don't like gels either? Is what I heard you say.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of gels. So most races have drop bags, and so I always have used drop bags, whether or not, I've done a lot of races without crew. The last few
Yeah,
races I've done, I have had crew, but I still pack my drop bags like I don't have crew.
yeah.
And so I put a lot of like snacks and food in there, and so I always have an option of like some heartier food, and then I eat a lot of like gluten based things when I'm running. So like I'll
Yeah.
have like muffins and cookies
Mm.
or like the bobo bites, different like of like the oat bites is what they are.
Oh,
They're kind of like
yeah,
um which are pretty good. And so just a variety of things that I can eat between aid stations where if they don't have a lot. And my go-to is usually like peanut butter and jelly, or I eat a lot of fruit, which obviously
okay,
can't fuel you for super long, but it does,
yeah,
between like, and yeah, in a pinch, yeah, I'm taking like 4 peanut butter and jellies and just forcing myself to eat them all, even if it's
yeah,
like, it sounds unappealing. You just gotta make yourself eat so you can keep running.
yeah, yeah. That sounds like a lot of it to me. It's just being able to eat enough so you don't crash like really hard.
Yeah, and I do eat some of the more like running focused things. Like I don't really like gels, but I eat a lot of like the chews, which are basically like candy.
Yeah, I do know those. At least I think Cliff Bar have some of them. They're like are they like sticks of kind of gel sweet things? Yeah.
Yeah, and recently I had a lot of issues at Cocodona with stomach problems, and so I never have used drink mixes really before, but I did start using like a drink mix called Scratch, and that actually helped me a lot. And so I am using a little bit more of that recently, and I'm planning to use that at Tahoe, and that helps supplement calories as well.
Yeah, yeah. So there's I know some people sound like really precise with their plan, like, oh, I'm gonna have this at this time and for this many miles. Are you kind of more like, I just gotta keep eating as much as you can? Yeah,
Yeah, pretty much. I try to eat something every hour, as much as I can remember to. So I always,
yeah,
I have a variety of like snacks basically, and I just try to eat like one package every hour. And
yeah,
usually that ends up being at least, 100 to 200 calories,
yeah,
which an hour, which I think is about what they say you can pretty much utilize, right? So
yeah,
it ends up working pretty well.
yeah, yeah. No, that sounds, yeah. Again, the more flexible you can be with it is probably better when you're going that far. It's not always gonna go to plan.
Yeah, like, if you're racing a 50K, you do have to be like really precise and, you
Yeah,
know, like you're probably not eating a lot of real food. It's probably a lot of like gels and stuff. So it's
yeah,
a very different for that distance, I would say for sure.
yeah, yeah. And then you also mentioned that you have started. I'm not. I can't remember how recent this interview was. Sorry, I'm getting my facts wrong. But you started using heart rate based training when beforehand you'd been doing it by feel. I guess how yeah, kind of how does that work? In your opinion, and has it made a difference to your running? Would you say?
Yeah, I'd say it's made like a huge difference. I mean, I switched to heart rate training when I first started using a coach in 2022. And so I had pretty much always just run based on feel. And I think it is important to a certain extent to be really aware, and to be able to train based on feel. But once you
Yeah.
get to a certain level and you are trying to, kind of level up your training, I think heart rate is a really uh, good way to go. And I read a book about different training styles, and they had talked about, like, Killian Jornet and how he does kind of heart rate based stuff, and a lot of the athletes are doing that now. And and when I switched to heart rate, I also switched to time based training as opposed to like mileage based. And I
Okay,
do
yeah.
think the combination of the two has really helped a lot.
Yeah. That's cool. Was it the coach that recommended it, or did that come from you?
Yeah, so his coaching style is, or the company is all heart based. So yeah, Luke got me to
Right.
start wearing the heart
Yeah.
rate monitor, and it was really annoying at first, but you get used to it, and then you end up like, yeah, it feels weird to run without it. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily, some people that do heart rate like are really chained to it, and for sure I look at it and I pay attention and I try to hit my average heart rate that I'm supposed to for each run,
Mm.
or a lot like this hill workouts are based on heart rate as opposed to like anything else. Um,
Okay.
so that's
Yeah.
really helpful. And it's just like it's good to get a sense for it. It's been really interesting switching because at this point I've been doing it long enough where I can, based on perceived effort, based on feel, I
Yeah.
can kind of tell where my heart rate is, and I kind of
Yeah.
know what each of the, like, I can tell if I'm running at like 140, you
Yeah.
know, beats per minute versus 150. Like I can tell that
Yeah.
difference. And so usually if it feels like I'm working too hard, I kind of know it. And so
Yeah.
it does kind of merge together, and you can kind of tell where your heart rate is based on feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's a really good skill to have. Actually, I think I and a lot of other people are maybe a bit too dependent on the watch, uh, which I'm starting not to like, especially because I'm fit right now. So I'm watching my heart rate skyrocket. But then also it was after listening to the interviews with you, I thought, what? That sounds so much better actually as a skill to have and a nicer way to run because it must help you out in races too to know the if you're in the right feeling for where you want to be and like self monitoring, that's a really good way to do it, I think. Yeah.
And
Um,
I never ran with a watch until I started heart rate training. Like
yeah.
I had a running watch, but I never wore it. So I didn't even like wear it during runs to like know what pace I was going. I just didn't,
Yeah.
I never knew. I just went out for my run.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've never been chained to my watch. And so it did take a lot of getting used to even like wearing a watch once I started doing the training. It was
Yeah.
weird.
No, that's really nice though. And you don't sound like too dependent on it even that you're doing the training and because it works for you and that's what you've been told to do by a coach as well, but it's not like an obsession in the nicest way possible to other runners who are more looking at it. It's not like an obsession with the data like afterwards, which is good. It's clearly suited you very well. So I'm gonna be switching definitely after after talking to you. Maybe as an excuse to ignore my heart rate, which is not the idea, but it's
Yeah,
fine.
and I used to just record on my phone. Like I use Strava a lot. And so I would just put Strava on my phone and record it and like stick it in my pack. And then I wouldn't, so I would have like the data and I would know how long, a run took me after, but just during the
Yeah,
run, I wasn't focused on it. And so I had the data to look at later, but I just, yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
have to worry about it when I was actually, I could just run however I felt that day, which I think was
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah,
Because,
that's
when you
really
get in your head about it and you're like, oh, I should be running faster. I'm only running, 11-minute pace in the trails. I should be running
yeah.
10-minute pace in the trails, but you're tired because maybe you didn't sleep well or you didn't eat enough the day before. And like, it's
Yeah.
good to be able to just run how you feel and not, because, pushing too hard when you're tired or underfed, like, will lead to injury. And so, to be able to
Yeah.
just leave that behind and just run however you feel that day, I think is can be good.
Yeah, and then you've got, yeah, like you said, you used to have it on your phone, you've got the indicator to look at after. Like that should be fine. Don't have to, because it can take over a run if you're
Mhm.
constantly monitoring yourself. Like, yeah, it's not a fun experience. Do you tend to run with other people? Do you have like a training group in Colorado, or is it mostly solo stuff?
For serious training, it's all solo. I definitely enjoy running with people, so I do go to group runs, and I have friends that I'll run with as well. Less often, because some of them live kind of far from me, but definitely for like some longer stuff, I'll do um, like high mountain stuff I like doing with other people just because it makes it fun. And then, yeah, I have weekly group runs I try to go to just kind of for the social aspect because it's fun to be around other people and do some easier runs with other people. But yeah, for any serious training, it kind of at the point I'm at in my
Yeah.
life and training, it has to be solo pretty much.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Um, yeah. I had a question in my head and it's just popped out. You said, "Oh yeah." It was about the wildlife where you are. This could be a weird question. It's because I've had a bad experience with sheep today. But I wanted to know, like, do you feel safe? Firstly, on your own, as a female, like solo runner out in mountains where there's like no one around, but also from like a wildlife perspective. I'm just interesting because you live in a completely different place to what I am used to or know about. So how is that, I guess?
Yeah, so it is a question you get a lot as a female athlete, I would say. Well, it's like just from other runners. I've never felt unsafe in the trails. Maybe that's just my personality or my lack of instincts in that regard. But I've always and I've gotten myself in some very dangerous situations as well, which is not great. But
Yeah.
in the mountains, I've always felt relatively self-sufficient and safe. Um,
Mhm.
I have had a lot of negative encounters, including during races. I've had some scary moments, but it's all been when I've been on the road. Like road running to
Oh,
me is very dangerous. Besides the car issue, which is a really big issue,
yeah.
and just like I did a race that was 300 plus miles, and it was all road in the southern U.S. and it was really remote areas, and I was by myself in sections, and I had some really negative, like where you
Wow.
do feel extremely unsafe. But that was always
Yeah.
on road. And so in the trails, I've always felt really safe. I've never
Yeah.
had a bad interaction. I've never had like a really scary interaction with another person.
Yeah.
Wildlife, there's been a few, we have rattlesnakes in Colorado and where I live. So that is something you have to pay attention to, but usually, usually they're chill when I've encountered them. And if they're not chill, like you can tell, like they're coiled up and making noise. So you just turn around. Um,
Yeah.
and there's been other interactions. There was a super aggressive cow at Cocodona one of the years I did it. Very aggressive. And I've run into bison out in on the trail by myself, and those are terrifying. And you just
Yeah.
kind of like stop and like back up and like don't engage at all and try and put some,
So,
I mean, they can charge so fast that you just have to
Oh,
hope that they're not spooked. Because if they charge
yeah,
you, there's nothing you can do.
yeah. Oh my
But just,
God.
yeah.
I love the cow.
Thankfully,
That's
I was
much.
with someone else, so he kind of was able to scare it off. But yeah, this cow was definitely staring us down and not moving, and was ready to like go at us. And so it
Was
was,
it in the night?
yeah.
Yeah, see, you took him by surprise. You shouldn't, you shouldn't do that. That's much more UK. I can relate to that one. I didn't actually realize that you guys had rattlesnakes. I more had an image of bears in my head. I don't know why. When I think of America, I think bears. But
No, and there are bears. We have small like black bears. But black bears are not they're not really aggressive. Unless you come up on like a mom and cubs or
yeah,
something. Like
yeah,
they're easily spooked and they don't want to engage with you. The
yeah,
northern kind of mountain areas in the US have grizzly bears, and those are the dangerous ones. But like in
yeah.
Colorado, we don't have grizzly bears.
Okay.
So it's not something you have to worry about. Like
Yeah.
yeah, Canada and like the northern mountains have the grizzlies, and that's what you have to watch out for in terms of bears. In Colorado, we have more interactions, I'd say, with like cats. So like mountain lions are
Okay.
an
Yeah.
issue. And so
Yeah.
typically if you hear about animal attacks in Colorado, it'll be like a mountain lion attack. But
Oh,
those are so rare as well.
okay.
It
Yeah.
happens every once in a while, but
Yeah.
you're as a runner, right? Like it's a lot more likely. I mean, even with how much trail running I do, it's so much more likely I'll get hit by a car than attacked by an
Yeah.
animal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. We just don't have as a visitor to the US, it's like something that you're more freaked out about because you're not used to hearing about it and stuff. But that's really interesting that you feel more safe on trails over road. That actually makes so much sense. Like there's gonna be more people on roads, isn't there anyway, or aren't there anyway? Because yeah, that's where the access points are for everyone. That makes a lot of sense. I'm just trying to think. I've had like maybe a couple experiences on trails where I felt, the gut feeling where you're like, oh, I don't like something's off. But then and my dog actually turned around, well, my mum's dog turned around once. I swear she like saved me from something that was like up ahead. She like her hairs went up on her back and she stopped ahead of me and she turned around. I was like, me too. Like I'm out. But I've had a couple bad experiences. You're right, in road. It was like in a city as well. So I hadn't thought about it like that because I kind of think like, oh, you're out so high up, middle of nowhere, no access to help. Um, in my head it was bears wanting to get you, but clearly not. But that's interesting. Makes a lot of sense. Do you take something with you on a run that you can, I mean, I guess you have a phone with you, but do you have something that you can call for help with and stuff?
No, I really just have my phone. I like for some of the more remote adventures, yeah, you should have an inReach device or something. I don't have one. I know it's not good, and I've had a couple experiences out on runs, like you said, where I could just feel something was off. I could feel,
Yeah,
like like it was misty. I couldn't really see very far. I knew
yeah,
there were bears. Like I could feel the bears. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. And yeah, I turned around. And so
yeah,
just as long as you pay attention to kind of that feeling, I think,
yeah.
humans and like running with the dog is also great,
Mm.
is you can usually tell if you're paying attention to that. And so I think just being aware is good. But and I don't, some people are like, oh, gotta run with bear spray. like unless you're in grizzly country, like you really
Yeah.
don't need to carry, like I
Hmm.
don't worry about carrying anything. And most of the places I run near where I live in Denver, they're so busy with so many people that actually this weekend I was running and someone's like, "Oh, we saw a bear on the trail." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I didn't see the bear, but there were, 6 people I passed on the way up. So like clearly the
Yeah.
bear was scared off." So like
Yeah.
even if there are animals, the trails I usually am on are so busy that for
Yeah.
something to actually happen would be really rare. And honestly, the biggest risk is probably for the people who, against the rules, have their dogs off leash, right? Like that's where I think something bad could happen because, a dog spooks a bear, the bear attacks the dog. That's probably a lot
Yeah.
more common than it actually attacking a person.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. That's not good. Especially a misbehaved dog, as you see quite often. Uh, well, you're putting my fear of sheep to shame, which is totally understandable because no one understands it here either. But it's lambing season here. I'm literally looking at sheep out of my window right now. They're everywhere, and I just can't bear it anymore. They're so aggressive when they have lambs with them. I've had it like I stopped up a hill today and I wouldn't go any further on the trail because they go like that at you, like ready to charge.
Oh my gosh.
I
Yeah,
can't
and
deal with
I
it.
when I visited Ireland at one point and I was doing some runs in like the countryside, and yeah, like sheep and cows that are super aggressive, but then if you come
Yeah,
across like dogs that someone has
yeah,
like at their house,
yeah.
and like I've been chased by dogs in Ireland and it was terrifying.
It is. It genuinely is.
And dog bites
Oh,
are not like, those can be really bad. Like those can get infected, and like
yeah,
no one wants
yeah.
to get bit by a dog either. So you're
Nope.
like, yeah,
100.
countryside,
Yeah.
mhm, dangerous stuff.
That's so funny. Yeah, dogs don't tend to like, well, they don't like runners, do they? They get
Mm-mm.
hyped up if you're running towards them, and that's when it goes. Well, I didn't realize you had been to Ireland. That wasn't for a race? Was that just a visit?
Yeah, I had a friend that was living there at the time, so it was just a visit.
Nice. Have you done any races in the UK, or are there plans to?
Um, Actually, I was just made aware because I did a race in Canada called Divide 200 last year,
Yeah.
which was a fun race, and they recently partnered, I guess, with a race in Wales. I think they said that's a 200 miler.
Okay.
Um, I forget what it's called, but yeah, so I was looking at that one. I mean, it's always intriguing like to look at the international races. I
Yeah.
I did attempt a race, my very first international race, well, besides Canada. Um,
Yeah.
I did try Tour a few years ago, Tour des Géants in Italy. And that
Yeah.
did not go well for, like, there was a lot going on in my life. And it was just not the time to be traveling for a race for me. But I will be going back this year to that race. But
Nice.
yeah, this new race in Wales, I was definitely intrigued by. So we'll see if I end up racing. It's just, it's expensive to
Yeah.
travel for races, and in the US we drive far
Yeah.
distances, and so most of my races, like I'm just driving and sleeping in my car. And
Yeah.
you can cut costs where you can, because race fees can be so high. So yeah,
Yeah.
I drive out to a lot of my races in my car and just have all my stuff and sleep in the car, and
Yeah.
harder to
Yeah.
do
That
that
makes
if you
sense.
have to travel.
Yeah. It'd be a big commitment as well to come over. You can't really just hop on a casual 15-hour flight, can you? Like, yeah. Oh well, yeah. We'll be looking out for any future race plans that you have. So you've got Tahoe in June this month, 2 weeks. And then the next one, I'm gonna pronounce it wrong. Is it Tour de Géant? Like,
I think that's what it is. I mean, I don't speak Italian either, so.
No, true. And that's in September.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll look out for any future plans that you might have this side of the ocean.
Yes.
Definitely cool to watch. But yeah, I guess that kind of wraps up what questions I had in mind. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. It's been awesome. I like watching your Instagram posts, and I was definitely stalking your Strava the other day. So, where can people find you to follow you at?
Yeah, so I'm not super active on social media. I do have my Instagram, which is Sugar Crash Vegan. And so people can follow along there. I've been trying to post a little bit more. It hasn't necessarily happened yet, but um, since I am running for John G now, I'm trying to be a little bit more active, but they post every
Yeah.
once in a while as well. And yeah, I'm most active on Strava under my name, Mika Thewes. I do post there most days. So if you want to
Nice.
know exactly where I am and what I'm up to, then Strava is definitely the place to look.
Nice.